So what I do is money becomes a plot element.
Hi, welcome to How to D&D. My name is Fred Wheeler, and today I want to talk about Dungeons and Dragons. This is actually a Dungeon Master round table made up of a whole lot of YouTube creators, and I have a bunch of people who are going to help me work through some questions. So if you'd like to introduce yourself.
How's it going? No Fun Allowed here, and I'm all about tabletop role-playing games, about running modules, and figuring out how to run all these fantastic systems.
Hey there, I'm Ryan with Roll for Initiative and play lots of different games. I love to run them. I really enjoy running convention games as well as my home tabletop games.
I am DM Scotty. Some people call me the craft father. I started using junk to make it in my D&D games and have terrain and that kind of thing. So here we are, the DM's craft, DM Scotty.
How do players or the players' characters in your games use gold in their Dungeons and Dragons or RPG games? Rather than how would you allow, as a dungeon master, them to use their gold, I'm actually kind of more interested about how your players try to use their gold in your current games or even past games.
Well, for me, first off, my players are lucky if they get gold in the first place. They're usually broke bums that are just, traveling around the place and doing whatever. But in the rare cases where they are lucky enough to get a few gold that they can rub, they have to do something with it because it's just going to weigh them down, or, oh, it's just the number that's big, but they want to do something with it. So in my games in particular, my players typically try to buy products that could make their lives better. Not necessarily magical items, but maybe, those little pieces of gear that they never could afford before. Or once they get enough money, they start looking into property. They start looking into having an actual home to call and stop being hobos. And they maybe send money back to their families because they're, insert whatever sibling is sick with some incurable disease that only can be solved with gold. Those are some of the things that they spend their gold on. But more typically, this gold that they spend is for furthering the campaign. It is for, okay, we need to buy this one McGuffin item to get us to this dungeon, and we have to spend this gold.
Ryan, what about you? How do your players use gold?
A lot of the times my players, it depends on the setting. So futuristic or science fiction-y type games, they'll use their gold, their credits or whatever it is on the ship, right? So if they expand the armory, well, then that might make running some of the missions a little bit easier, some of that kind of thing. So, no fun, like you were saying, there was buying a keep. Well, they're flying their keep around. And then in my fantasy games, I like having a lot of social intrigue and political intrigue and that side of things. And so for the most part, my players like to use their gold. Well, whose palms can they grease? Right? I mean, if they're trying to convince somebody to do something for them, well, can we just bribe them? And if they're super wealthy, okay, well, we can't bribe them, but can we find a way to spread some wealth around in order to make things a little bit easier for them? Freddie, like you were saying, I don't give a ton of gold out at the very beginning, and then by the time mid campaign, gold starts to become just this thing that doesn't matter anymore. So then I start saying, well, okay, well, it might cost that much, but you also need a blue diamond, or you need a blah 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 thing to get them away from the gold, so it becomes something that's a little scarce, but they can still use it in pretty fun ways that isn't just buying more arrows.
Scotty, what about you? How do your players tend to use gold in your games?
Yeah, it's interesting because even though you're talking about from the player point of view, it's kind of informed by how the game master runs the game, right? If you're a bean counter type of DM and you want to account for every copper piece, right? You want them to make a ledger that they turn into you at the end of the game, then that's a certain way to play. I'm the totally opposite end of that way to play. I'm not a bean counter. We don't count treasure or gold, really the only thing the players want, in my experience, are magic items, right? That is the true thing. So if you can't buy magic items with gold, what do you do with it once you have all your gear, right? Like you can buy, castles or whatever, but maybe you don't want to do that. Maybe the campaign's not about that. Maybe your group is trying to save the world and they don't have time to settle down. They don't want to bother with that. So what I do is money becomes a plot element. Okay. Oftentimes my players will end up with a bag of holding, and they just throw all their valuables in it. When they find stuff, they find, I'll say, like it's a large hoard or it's a small hoard or whatever, and they'll just throw it in the bag of holding. Okay. And then maybe a situation comes up where they can use that. Like I had a thing in my game where they were negotiating with a dragon. They said, hey, we have this rather sizable amount of money, with us. Would be willing to trade, of course, flattery went a long way with the dragon, to flatter the dragon, not only give them money, but, so it becomes a role-playing element. It doesn't become, as I call it, a bean counter element where you track each piece of gold. It just becomes a plot element. And so that's really how I play. And so that's how my players have learned to play. Like we don't really track it. I like to make rewards, like if it was like a castle or, maybe they get a ship or something, that it's something that, they're helping somebody and it's gifted to them as a temporary thing, or there's a crew already on it and they're just going along for the ride, that kind of thing, as opposed to actually tracking accounts, so yeah, that's how I do it.
Interesting. I haven't really come across that approach, but I can see a lot of benefits in it. For me, I'm not really interested in counting every single gold coin, so going to an inn and spending gold there and tracking all that sort of stuff and how many arrows you've used. I don't really care. But my players have sort of, through the way I run the game and just through time, they spend most of their gold on buying consumable magic items, because I still give them a magic shop. Otherwise, they seem to get upset with me. And I don't want to have a magic shop that sells permanent magic weapons and armor and stuff like that. But consumables are not so bad, so I do that. And they do make their own custom armor and weapons, but they're not necessarily magical. I've done that in the past. It didn't do very well. I'm not doing it again. It was painful. But they have been making non-magical armor and weapons out of stuff that they find along the way. They acquired a manor recently, and it's a castle. They renovated the manor, rebuilt it. They're rebuilding a town and using the money from that. A lot of gambling, a lot of horses, because fireballs tend to take out horses rather than the characters. Bribery, definitely, a lot of bribery. Hiring companions and sidekicks and hirelings. I've used it for that quite a lot recently. So yeah, I have been sort of trying to pay a bit more attention to, if I'm going to give out like money, well, how can they use it, and what am I prepared to sort of allow them to do with it, and what do they want to do with it? And those tend to be the things that they sort of want to do. So yeah, that's how I've been using gold in my game.
Still allow all that. I just don't track it, unless it's a huge amount, like when they gifted the dragon like virtually all their money. We just say, you have most of your wealth left, or you have a little bit left, or and that we just track it that way, as opposed to like how much it is.
Well, I think back, I think back just AD&D or something like that. And I know there's a couple of other systems that gold was the method of experience point acquisition. Now, I tend to run, I just let characters know when they level up. But I know that there's a couple of them out there that essentially you X gold, you can buy your experience points, or even it becomes this meta thing that's out there, which I haven't really run that personally, but it seems interesting, and it seems like it would be a fun way of being like, well, if the goal is to acquire wealth to advance your character as opposed to kill stuff to advance your character, that also can start to change maybe some of the thinking of some of the players. But I don't know if any of you have run those types of systems.
I run a lot of old school right now, old school essentials in particular, and for sure, if there's a room with a whole bunch of orcs and a whole bunch of loot, normally it's just go in there, kill the orcs. But in a game that's deadly, where the orc hits you one time and you're dead, then you start thinking to yourself, okay, what if we distracted the orcs? What if we flushed out the orcs? What if we got the other monsters in the dungeon to attack the orcs? Killing the orcs gets you a little bit of XP, but no one cares about that if you're dead. What you care about is getting the loot. So it definitely changes the mentality of the game.
Yeah, I think I kind of feel like, the acquisition of stuff for players is there's the treasure, and then there's the character leveling side of things, right? Which is usually measured by killing monsters. So our killing monsters and our treasure seem to be our two main things that they're trying to do. It would be nice to sort of move a little bit beyond that, so it's not those two factors that are instrumental in their motivation. But it does feel like we are pushing shit uphill, because you can't make the players think a particular way. You just have to respond to how they function. And if you're going to get them to think that way, it'd take an awful lot of training or retraining on your part, and probably a lot of headaches, and you probably still wouldn't be satisfied at the end of it. I would like everybody who is running a game, let us know how your players use gold in your games. Let us know down in the comments. So this has been our discussion, roundtable discussion. Hopefully it's been useful to you, which I think it will be. And if you want to go and check out some of these really interesting and useful and helpful individuals who are doing lots of really good content on YouTube, you can check them out at the following places. So where can they find you, No Fun?
Yeah, how's it going? No Fun Allowed. You can find me on YouTube, Twitter, and that's pretty much all I'm active on. I'm just pumping out videos all the time, and if you comment, I'm probably going to answer.
Ryan, what about you? Where can they find you?
You can find me at Roll4 Initiative, roll the number 4 Initiative, and that's on YouTube, Twitter, Instagram. Come and find us and our videos and all that kind of stuff. We'd love to see you.
Scotty, where can they find you?
You guys can find me on YouTube, the DM's Craft, where I make cheap junk into terrain for my D&D game. You can find me on Facebook, the Tabletop Crafters Guild. And you can also find me at Quest Givers, where we have a site where we have modules that I've written and done terrain pictures for and that kind of thing. We also just released our campaign book called The North Road, which is a successful Kickstarter, and we've got it up there for sale now. Over 400 pages of content, a whole campaign. So check it out, Quest Givers. And I also have a channel too.
Thank you, all of you. It's been really, really helpful. I'm so glad you came, and I am looking forward to hopefully continuing our discussions in the future. So for all of you, thank you for tuning in, and hey, till next time, keep rolling those 20s.